good evening. So this is a continuation of reading Lady Susan by Jane Austen. Letters 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Letter 4. Mr. De Courcy to Mrs. Vernon. My dear sister, I congratulate you and Mr. Vernon on being about to receive into your family the most accomplished coquette in England. As a very distinguished flirt, I have always been taught to consider her, but it has lately fallen in my way to hear some particulars of her conduct at Langford, which prove that she does not confine herself to that sort of honest flirtation which satisfies most people, but aspires to the more delicious gratification of making a whole family miserable. By her behavior to Mr. Mainwaring, she gave jealousy and wretchedness to his wife, and by her attentions to a young man previously attached to Mr. Mainwaring's sister, deprived an amiable girl of her lover. I learned all this from a Mr. Smith, who was just come from Langford. I have dined with him at Hurst and Wilford, who is just... I learned all this from a Mr. Smith now in this neighborhood. I have dined with him at Hurst and Wilford, who is just come from Langford, where he was a fortnight in the house with her ladyship, and who is therefore well qualified to make the communication. What a woman she must be! I long to see her, and shall certainly accept your kind invitation, that I may form some idea of those bewitching powers which can do so much, engaging at the same time and in the same house the affections of two men who were neither of them at liberty to bestow them, and all this without the charm of youth. I am glad to find that Miss Vernon does not come with her mother to Churchill, as she has not even manners to recommend her, and, according to Mr. Smith's account, is equally dull and proud. Where pride and stupidity unite, there can be no dissimulation worthy notice, and Miss Vernon shall be consigned to unrelenting contempt. But by all that I can gather, Lady Susan possesses a degree of captivating deceit which must be pleasing to witness and detect. I shall be with you very soon, and am your affectionate brother, Reginald de Courcy. Letter 5. Lady Susan to Mrs. Johnson. I received your note, my dear Alicia, just before I left town, and rejoiced to be assured that Johnson suspected nothing of your engagement the evening before. It is undoubtedly better to deceive him entirely. Since he will be stubborn, he must be tricked. I arrived here in safety and have no reason to complain of my reception from Mr. Vernon, but I confess myself not equally satisfied with the conduct of his lady. She is perfectly well bred indeed, and has the air of a woman of fashion, but her manners are not such as can persuade me of her being prepossessed in my favor. I wanted her to be delighted at seeing me. I was as amiable as possible on the occasion. But all in vain. She does not like me. To be sure, when we consider that I did take some pains to prevent my brother-in-law's marrying her, consider this want of cordiality is not very surprising, and yet shows an illiberal and vindictive spirit to resent a project which influenced me 6 years ago, and which never succeeded at last. I am sometimes half disposed to repent that I did not let Charles buy Vernon Castle when we were obliged to sell it, but it was a trying circumstance, especially as the sale took place exactly at the time of his marriage, and everybody ought to respect the delicacy of those feelings which could not endure that my husband's dignity should be lessened by his younger brother's having possession of the family estate. Could matters have been so arranged as to prevent the necessity of our leaving the castle, could we have lived with Charles and kept him single, I should have been very far from persuading my husband to dispose of it elsewhere. But Charles was then on the point of marrying Miss de Courcy, and the event has justified me. Here are children in abundance, and what benefit could have accrued to me from his purchasing Vernon? My having prevented it may perhaps have given his wife an unfavorable impression, but where there is a disposition to dislike, a motive will never be wanting. And as to money matters, it has not withheld him from being very useful to me. I really have a regard for him. He is so easily imposed on. The house is a good one, the furniture fashionable, and everything announces plenty and elegance. Charles is very rich, I am sure. When a man has once got his name in a banking house, he rolls in money. But they do not know what to do with their fortune, keep very little company, and never go to town but on business. We shall be as stupid as possible. I mean to win my sister-in-law's heart through her children. I know all their names already, and am going to attach myself with the greatest sensibility to one in particular, a young Frederick, whom I take on my lap and sigh over for his dear uncle's sake. Poor Mainwaring, I need not tell you how much I miss him, how perpetually he is in my thoughts. I found a dismal letter from him on my arrival here, full of complaints of his wife and sister, and lamentations on the cruelty of his fate. I passed off the letter as his wife's to the Vernons, and when I write to him, it must be under cover to you. Yours ever, S.V. Last letter. Well, let's see how long letter 7 is. 7, 8, and 9. Let's see how many letters there are. There's a lot of letters. Alright. Alright, there's 41 letters. Alright. Okay, so letter 6 is the last one for this video, and I'll continue in another one. Letter 6. Mrs. Vernon to Mr. de Courcy, Churchill. Well, my dear Reginald, I have seen this dangerous creature, and must give you some description of her, though I hope you will soon be able to conform your own judgment. She is really excessively pretty. However you may choose to question the allurements of a lady no longer young, I must for my own part declare that I have seldom seen so lovely a woman as Lady Susan. She is delicately fair, with fine gray eyes and dark eyelashes, and from her appearance one would not suppose her more than 25, though she must in fact be 10 years older. I was certainly not disposed to admire her, though always hearing she was beautiful, but I cannot help feeling that she possesses an uncommon union of symmetry, brilliancy, and grace. Her address to me was so gentle, frank, and even affectionate, that if I had not known how much she has always disliked me for marrying Mr. Vernon, and that we had never met before, I should have imagined her an attached friend. One is apt, I believe, to connect assurance of manner with coquetry, and to expect that an impudent address will necessarily attend an impudent mind. At least I was myself prepared for an improper degree of confidence in Lady Susan. But her countenance is absolutely sweet, and her voice and manner winningly mild. I am sorry it is so, for what is this but deceit? Unfortunately, one knows her too well. She is clever and agreeable, has all the knowledge of the world which makes conversation easy, and talks very well, with a happy command of language, which is too often used, I believe, to make black appear white. She has already almost persuaded me of her being warmly attached to her daughter, though I have so long been convinced of the contrary. She speaks of her with so much tenderness and anxiety, lamenting so bitterly the neglect of her education, which she represents, however, as wholly unavoidable, that I am forced to recollect how many successive springs her ladyship spent in town, while her daughter was left in Staffordshire to care of servants or a governess very little better, to prevent my believing whatever she says. If her manners have so great an influence on my resentful heart, you may guess how much more strongly they operate on Mr. Vernon's generous temper. I wish I could be as well satisfied as he is that it was really her choice to leave Langford for Churchill, and if she had not stayed 3 months there before she discovered that her friend's manner of living did not suit her situation or feelings, I might have believed that concern for the loss of such a husband as Mr. Vernon, to whom her own behavior was far from unexceptionable, might for a time make her wish for retirement. I cannot forget the length of her visit to the Manwarings, and when I reflect on the different mode of life which she led with them from that of which she must now submit, I can only suppose that the wish of establishing her reputation by following, though late, the path of propriety occasioned her removal from a family where she must in reality have been particularly happy. Your friend Mr. Smith's story, however, cannot be quite true, as she corresponds regularly with Mrs. Mainwaring. At any rate, it must be exaggerated. It is scarcely possible that 2 men should be so grossly deceived by her at once. Yours, etc., Catherine Vernon. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye. Have a good night.